Lena stood at the edge of the forest, the mist rolling in from the unknown. The towering trees behind her whispered in the wind, as though they were trying to hold her back, to remind her of the comfort and safety she was leaving behind. She had always felt at home here, surrounded by the ancient woods, the cool, earthy scent of moss, and the sounds of creatures hidden deep within the thicket. But today was different. Today, she faced a path she could no longer ignore, the path leading to the ancient temple. Her mother's cryptic tales echoed in her mind. The temple was the key to her heritage, her true nature. But it had always seemed like a far-off legend, something distant and unattainable. Yet, the pendant around her neck had begun to pulse with an energy she couldn't deny, its dragon eye shape glowing faintly, urging her to follow the path that lay ahead. Lena's fingers brushed the pendant, the cool metal suddenly warm against her skin. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. There was no turning back. The temple was calling her, and the answers she sought were just beyond the mist. With a final glance at the forest, Lena stepped forward, leaving behind everything she knew to uncover the truth about herself. Lena's first step into the mist was tentative, as if the fog itself might swallow her whole. The path stretched out before her, disappearing into the dense, swirling mist that clung to the air like a thick veil. The soft glow from the pendant around her neck was the only light in the darkness, casting a faint, eerie glow on the surrounding trees. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the distant rustling of leaves and the faint crunch of her boots against the earth. The trees here were different, taller, older, their gnarled roots twisting like ancient serpents in the underbrush. The forest seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the atmosphere charged with an energy Lena could feel in her very bones. It was as though the forest was aware of her presence, watching her every move. The weight of the unseen eyes made her skin prickle, but she pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest. As she moved deeper into the fog, the path seemed to shift, winding and bending in ways that defied logic. Lena's gaze was fixed ahead, her breath shallow. She couldn't afford to doubt herself now. The temple was out there, somewhere in the mist. And with every step, she knew she was getting closer to the answers that had eluded her for so long. As Lena walked deeper into the mist, the pendant around her neck grew warmer, its faint glow intensifying with each step. She glanced down at it, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. The dragon eye shape seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, and she felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation spreading through her chest. It was as if the pendant was more than just a piece of jewelry, there was power hidden within it, a power that was awakening as she ventured farther into the unknown. The path before her twisted and turned, the dense trees blocking her view of what lay ahead. But Lena wasn't afraid. She was determined. The stories she had heard all her life now seemed to come alive in her mind, as though the words her mother had whispered were starting to make sense. The temple, the pendant, her mysterious heritage, everything was connected, and she was beginning to understand that her journey wasn't just about finding a place. It was about discovering who she truly was. The energy within her, connected to the pendant, thrummed with power. Lena felt an overwhelming sense of purpose, as though the temple itself was calling her. She pushed forward, trusting in the pull of the pendant, knowing it would lead her to the answers she sought. The path grew narrower as Lena ventured further, the mist thickening with each step. The air around her seemed to hum, the energy within the forest growing more intense. She paused, her senses alert, as a low growl echoed from the shadows. Her heart skipped a beat. The forest had always been a place of mystery, but this felt different. Something watched her from the darkness, something hidden just beyond the reach of the pendant's glow. A figure appeared suddenly, stepping out from behind a towering tree. It was humanoid in shape but covered in shadow, its eyes glowing faintly like embers in the night. Lena instinctively stepped back, her hand reaching for the pendant. The figure tilted its head, studying her with an unreadable expression. "You seek the temple," the figure's voice was low, raspy, as though it hadn't spoken in centuries. "But not all who search are meant to find it." Lena's pulse quickened, but she didn't let fear control her. She had come too far to turn back now. "I'm not afraid," Lena replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "I will find the temple." The figure's eyes glowed brighter, and it slowly nodded. "Then you must be ready, child. The temple is not a place, it is a test." The figure's cryptic words hung in the air like a warning. Lena felt her grip tighten on the pendant as the figure stepped back into the shadows. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath, the stillness broken only by the distant sounds of wildlife. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, and Lena couldn't help but wonder what test the figure had spoken of. The path before her seemed unchanged, but there was a new energy in the air, a subtle shift that made her uneasy. The pendant pulsed again, more strongly this time, as though urging her forward. She hesitated for only a moment before taking a step, then another, her feet moving almost instinctively. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and the trees around her began to shift, their roots creaking and groaning as if they were alive. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The test had begun. A deep rumble echoed through the forest, and before she could react, a large stone door rose from the ground in front of her, covered in ancient runes. The symbols glowed faintly, and Lena could feel their power radiating outwards. She knew this was the entrance to the temple. But how would she open it? Lena stood before the massive stone door, the faint glow of the ancient runes casting an eerie light on her face. The symbols etched into the stone pulsed with an otherworldly energy, vibrating beneath her fingertips. She reached out hesitantly, drawn by an invisible force, and gently touched one of the runes. A surge of power coursed through her, and the pendant around her neck flared brightly, as if recognizing the connection. The moment her fingers made contact, the air around her crackled with magic. The trees around her seemed to respond, their branches swaying in rhythm with the energy now flooding the forest. The runes on the door glowed brighter, and Lena could feel her heart racing. Something was awakening within her, something tied to the temple, and she had no choice but to keep going. As her hand lingered on the stone, the runes shifted, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. A low rumbling sound filled the air, and the door slowly began to open, the heavy stone grinding against the earth with a deafening noise. Lena's breath caught in her throat, but she held her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. The temple was beyond the door, but what awaited her inside? She couldn't turn back now. The stone door creaked open, revealing a dark, vast chamber beyond. Lena stepped forward cautiously, the faint glow from her pendant illuminating the space just enough to reveal the ancient stone walls covered in intricate carvings. The air inside the temple felt thick with the weight of history, as though the very stones had witnessed centuries of secrets. Every breath she took seemed to echo in the silence. Her footsteps were muffled on the cold stone floor, but the stillness of the temple was unsettling, as if the place itself was waiting for something. The walls around her pulsed with a strange energy, and Lena could feel it humming beneath her skin, resonating with the power of the pendant. It was as if the temple was alive, responding to her presence. The deeper she moved into the chamber, the stronger the pull from the pendant became. It tugged at her, guiding her through the darkness. She walked slowly, her senses alert, every shadow seeming to flicker with hidden meaning. The path ahead twisted and turned, as if it were designed to confuse her, to test her resolve. Suddenly, the air shifted, and a deep voice echoed through the chamber. "Only those worthy can awaken the temple's true power." Lena stopped in her tracks, fear and determination warring within her. Lena's breath hitched as the voice resonated through the temple's vast chamber, its deep, ancient tone filling the air. It was not coming from any single direction, but from everywhere, as though the very walls were speaking. She could feel the weight of its words pressing against her, urging her to prove herself. Every instinct within her screamed to turn back, but the pull of the pendant, the undeniable connection to the power within these walls, kept her rooted in place. "Who are you?" Lena asked, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "What do you want from me?" The voice remained silent for a moment, and for a brief second, Lena wondered if it had vanished entirely. Then, it spoke again, softer this time, but no less powerful. "Your journey has just begun, child. The power you seek is within you, but only by facing what lies ahead will you unlock it." The ground beneath her feet trembled slightly, and the pendant around her neck pulsed in response. Lena closed her eyes, her hand clutching the pendant tightly. She wasn't just seeking power, she was seeking the truth about who she was, and what she was destined to become. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for whatever came next. Lena stepped forward, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the thick stone beneath her feet. The voice from before had faded, but its words lingered in the air, like a distant echo she couldn't shake. She felt the presence of the temple around her, its energy both comforting and overwhelming. The deeper she ventured, the more she realized how vast the temple truly was. It wasn't just a structure, it was a living entity, with a mind and purpose of its own. As she walked, she noticed the walls were lined with carvings, each one depicting ancient scenes, dragons soaring through the sky, their massive wings casting shadows over kingdoms below, warriors kneeling before an unseen force, symbol she didn't recognize. The carvings seemed to shift as she passed, their forms changing like reflections in water. A low hum vibrated through the floor, and Lena could feel it in her bones, deep within her chest. She paused, glancing around. The hum was growing louder, more insistent. She followed the sound, drawn to it as if it was calling her. The corridor opened up into a vast hall, its ceiling lost in shadow. The hum was now a constant presence, vibrating through the air and echoing off the stone walls. The path forward was unclear, but Lena felt her destiny waiting just ahead. The hall of echoes stretched before Lena, its stone floor glimmering with an unnatural light. The hum from the walls had become a steady vibration that pulsed through the air, resonating with the pendant around her neck. She felt it, too, a strange warmth, a connection that seemed to draw her towards something powerful, something ancient. At the far end of the hall, a massive stone archway loomed, bathed in an eerie, golden light. Lena's heart raced as she stepped closer, the glow growing stronger with each step. The light seemed to reach out to her, pulling her into its embrace. She had no choice but to move forward. As she passed beneath the archway, the temperature shifted. The air was thick with power, and the weight of the temple's magic seemed to press against her from all sides. Lena's fingers brushed the stone walls, and she could feel the pulse of energy beneath her touch, as though the very walls were alive with ancient knowledge. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, bathed in golden light. On it rested an intricately carved stone sphere, its surface glowing with the same light that surrounded her. This was the heart of the temple, and Lena knew instinctively that it held the answers she had been searching for. Lena approached the pedestal with caution, her breath steady but her heart racing. The stone sphere sat on the pedestal, its glow pulsing with a rhythmic energy that matched the beat of her own heart. The closer she got, the more she could feel its power. It was as if the sphere was calling to her, drawing her in with an invisible force. She knew this moment was crucial. Whatever she did now would shape the course of her journey. Reaching out, Lena touched the surface of the sphere. Instantly, a wave of energy surged through her, stronger than anything she had felt before. Her body trembled as the power coursed through her veins, and for a fleeting moment, she felt as though she might collapse under its weight. But she held on, refusing to pull away. The light from the sphere flared brighter, and Lena felt something shift deep within her. It was as if the very essence of the temple had awakened, and with it, the dormant power inside her began to stir. The pendant around her neck grew warmer, its dragon eye shape glowing fiercely. A voice, not of the temple but of her own mind, whispered, "You are ready." Lena's heart surged. She was no longer just a seeker, she was a force to be reckoned with. The energy from the sphere surged within Lena, filling every inch of her being with an intensity that took her breath away. Her body felt as though it were on fire, the power she had just unlocked threatening to overwhelm her. But she didn't back down. She was ready for this. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when everything would change. As the light from the sphere dimmed, a deep, rumbling voice echoed through the chamber. "To wield this power, you must first prove your worth." Lena's body stiffened. She looked around, trying to pinpoint the source of the voice, but there was no one in sight. The temple itself seemed to be speaking, its ancient magic now fully awakened. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and a swirling vortex of energy began to form in the center of the chamber. A figure emerged from the vortex, cloaked in darkness, its form shifting and contorting like smoke in the wind. "This is your trial," the voice spoke again, this time from the figure. "Face me, and only then will you earn the power you seek." Lena stepped forward, her heart pounding, her mind racing. There was no turning back now. She would face this trial, and she would conquer it. The cloaked figure loomed before Lena, its shape flickering like an illusion in the swirling vortex of energy. She could feel its gaze, cold and calculating, even though its face remained hidden beneath the shadow of its hood. The air around her crackled with tension, the space between them charged with an unseen force. Lena tightened her grip on the pendant, the dragon eye glowing faintly, as if offering her strength. "You seek power, but power comes at a cost," the figure intoned, its voice low and unsettling. "You must face your greatest fear to prove your worth. Only then will you unlock the true potential within you." Lena's breath caught in her throat. Her greatest fear? What could it possibly be? She had already faced so much, lost her past, discovered her true nature as a dragon, and ventured into this forsaken temple in search of answers. But fear? What did it mean to face that? Without warning, the air around her shifted. The shadows grew darker, and the world seemed to warp. Lena's surroundings melted away, and she was standing in a place unfamiliar, an endless, desolate wasteland under a blood-red sky. Her heart began to race. This wasn't just a test, this was a nightmare come to life. Lena stood alone in the vast emptiness of the wasteland, the blood-red sky above her pressing down like a heavy weight. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and barren, stretching endlessly in all directions. The air felt thick with despair, each breath she took heavy and suffocating. It was a place of abandonment, a place where hope had long since died. A chill ran down Lena's spine as she looked around. This was no ordinary vision. This was something deeper, something personal. The very air seemed to whisper her name, and with it came a crushing realization. This wasteland was her fear. It wasn't just the desolation she saw around her, but the thought of being alone, of losing everything and everyone she cared about. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself, but the shadows around her began to move. Shapes formed from the darkness, twisted and grotesque, each one a reflection of her own doubts and insecurities. They whispered to her, their voices echoing in the stillness, calling out her deepest fears. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the pull of the shadows. They were her fears personified, but they could only hold power if she allowed them to. With a surge of determination, she stepped forward. "I am not afraid," she whispered. The shadows advanced, their forms twisting and writhing as they circled Lena. The air around her seemed to thicken with their presence, their voices a low, constant murmur that tugged at the edges of her mind. The fear they represented was real, so real that it felt as if it were seeping into her bones. Every whisper, every haunting image they conjured, pushed her closer to the edge. "You're nothing," one shadow hissed. "Weak. Alone. Everything you've lost is gone forever," another added, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. But Lena didn't flinch. She stood tall, her hand still gripping the pendant. She could feel its warmth now, pulsing with the power she had awakened. It was the same power that had led her here, the power to face her fears, to confront the darkness within. "I'm not afraid of you," Lena said, her voice firm despite the dread clawing at her insides. "You are just illusions. And I won't let you control me." The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering as if in doubt. Lena's voice grew stronger, her words sharp like a blade. "I've come too far to be stopped by my fears. I know who I am. And I will not turn back." The shadows shrieked, dissolving into the ether as Lena stood resolute. The moment the shadows vanished, the wasteland began to crumble. The ground beneath Lena's feet cracked open, and the blood-red sky above her shifted to a deep, vibrant blue. She felt an overwhelming force surging through her, a wave of energy that seemed to lift her from the desolation and into the light. It was as though the very essence of the temple had recognized her strength. Lena gasped, her body trembling as the power coursed through her veins, igniting every cell with warmth and light. Her pendant, The dragon eye pulsed fiercely against her chest. It was no longer just a symbol, it was a key. The key to her transformation. A deep, rumbling sound filled the air, and the ground before her began to tremble. Slowly, a massive shape emerged from the earth, coiling like a serpent made of stone. It was a dragon, a creature of ancient power, its scales shimmering with the glow of the temple's magic. Lena watched in awe as the dragon's form solidified, its eyes glowing with the same fire that burned in her soul. This was her true nature. The dragon was her destiny. Lena closed her eyes, embracing the change. She could feel the transformation beginning, her body shifting and reshaping. "I am ready," she whispered. The energy that had been surging through Lena intensified, wrapping around her like a torrent of flame and light. Her heart raced, and her body pulsed with the power of the dragon within her. The ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble in response, as if the earth itself recognized the awakening of something ancient and unstoppable. Lena's hands clenched at her sides, her fingers curling and uncurling as if they were no longer entirely her own. The pendant around her neck grew warmer, its glow now blinding, and in the center of her chest, she could feel the dragon's power stirring, an untamed force that had been lying dormant for centuries. She could hear the voice of the dragon in her mind, ancient and wise, urging her to embrace her true form. Her body began to shift. Her skin, once soft and human, hardened into a shimmering, iridescent surface. Her spine elongated, and from her back, great wings of scale and bone unfurled. Pain lanced through her, but it was a pain of rebirth, a pain that was quickly replaced with a sense of exhilaration. When the transformation was complete, Lena stood as a dragon. Her new form towered over the ruins, the dragon's power coursing through her veins. "I am the last of the old world," she whispered, her voice now a deep, resonant growl. Lena stood tall in her new form, the air around her crackling with the power of the dragon. Her wings flexed, stretching out wide as she tested her newfound strength. The scales along her body shimmered in the dim light of the temple, their iridescent glow reflecting the raw energy now flowing through her veins. She could feel the earth beneath her, the pulse of the ancient temple resonating with her every movement. The transformation had been overwhelming, but now, standing as a dragon, she felt more alive than ever. The weight of her new form was both empowering and freeing. She no longer felt confined by the limitations of her human body. She had become something ancient, something powerful, a force that had been hidden away, waiting for the right moment to rise. Lena's mind raced with thoughts of what this meant. She had always known there was something special about her, something different. But now, standing in the heart of the temple, she realized the full scope of her potential. She was no longer just a girl who had been searching for answers, she was the key to unlocking a power greater than anything she had imagined. "I am ready to embrace my destiny," she thought, her voice echoing in her mind. The temple seemed to respond, its walls vibrating with approval. As Lena stood in her dragon form, the temple around her seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The walls shimmered, and the air hummed with ancient energy. It was as if the entire structure had been waiting for this moment, for her to awaken the dormant power within it. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the chamber, sending a ripple of tension through the air. Lena's wings flared instinctively as she turned to face the source of the sound. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, a massive figure emerged. It was the guardian, the ancient protector of the temple, a creature forged from stone and magic, its eyes glowing with an inner fire. "You have come far, child of the old world," the guardian's voice boomed, deep and thunderous. "But to prove your worth, you must face me." Lena felt the weight of the challenge, but she stood firm, her tail swishing behind her. This was the final test, the moment that would determine if she was truly ready to wield the power of the dragon. "I'm ready," Lena growled, her voice now powerful and resonant. The guardian took a step forward, its massive claws scraping the stone floor as it prepared to strike. Lena braced herself for the fight. The guardian lunged, its massive form moving with surprising speed despite its stone-like appearance. Lena barely had time to react as the creature's claws slashed through the air, missing her by mere inches. She quickly took to the sky, her powerful wings propelling her upward as she soared above the guardian's reach. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her as she circled, her heart pounding in her chest. The guardian's growl echoed through the temple, a sound of rage and defiance. Lena's gaze locked onto the creature as it turned, ready to strike again. This time, Lena did not hesitate. With a fierce roar, she dove toward the guardian, her body a blur of movement. As she neared, the air around her crackled with the raw power of the dragon's magic. She could feel the energy building within her, her breath hot with fire. With a powerful thrust, Lena unleashed a burst of flame from her mouth. The fire struck the guardian directly, engulfing it in a blaze of light and heat. The creature howled in pain, its form beginning to crumble under the force of her attack. The battle was over. Lena stood victorious, her wings still outstretched as the guardian's stone body shattered around her. "I've done it," she whispered to herself, breathing deeply.